You're ready, you let me. Good.
Yes.
Continuation of the meeting comes your way on 5, 4, 3.
I want to thank everybody again for coming this evening. Sorry about the cramped quarters. This is the best we could do. We ran out of chairs. Appreciate everybody being here. Before I introduce our guest speaker, I just want to go through a couple things on exactly what this is and what it isn't. I know everybody has a lot of questions on the current condition of what's going on. You have insurance questions. You might even have FEMA map questions. We're not going to answer questions on that at this time. We can answer some of those questions that we are able to answer, but our speaker tonight represents the Home Raising Association, and comes to us most recently, I guess, working in Louisiana, where they've, as you know, since Katrina, have raised 6,000 homes. Okay, and Rod is also the only historic resource specialist in the house raising industry. Just to give you a little bit of an idea, because I know a lot of people have come here wondering what's going to happen with the maps. Do I have to raise my house? What zone am I going to be in? This is still an ongoing process. We are in probably 2 to 3 different meetings every week with the town engineers, all the mayors, all the counties. We all have the same questions. We all have the same concerns. Everybody's pretty upset by some of the changes in the advisory maps. The advisory maps are not to a final step yet that we can even put a formal rebuttal or protest back into the maps. The next step, they're doing county by county. Hopefully we'll have some maps for Ocean County in May. At that time, we were working with the Coastal Research Center out of Stockton University that has been involved in modeling with the Army Corps of Engineers for the beach replenishments, and I guess they've been working with the government on these kind of projects for the last 30 years. There, unfortunately, very little anybody can do individually in this whole process. Not only is it a county process, it's going to have to be a state process to address some of the things with the maps. So even though we go through this evening, some, I'm sure sitting in the rooms wondering why they may be in a V zone, what really happened, how high would I have to raise my house. We can't really address those yet until we get to the next step of arguing or fighting or discussing with FEMA. They have an engineering company putting the maps together. They are just in the advisory steps, so the purpose of the meeting tonight is strictly educational, and just to know if we have to raise our houses, and I think it's going to be with us for a long period of time. There's a strong industry behind us. They have supported Rod to be here, to be as an advocate or a teacher. And if anybody has any questions, we'd like to try to keep it specific to this presentation. And I'd like to maybe turn it over right now to Rod Scott, and we really thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you all for coming out tonight and spending some of your time with me. I appreciate your enthusiasm and interest, maybe not enthusiasm, but interest. I've spent the last 20 years of my life working in fire and flood restoration for insurance companies. I've done hundreds of houses, hundreds of commercial buildings recovered from fires and floods. So what you're going through, I have been through with owners of buildings for many, many, many years, and I understand all the phases you're going through and all of the issues you're dealing with. You have the added distinction, unfortunately, of being the first disaster in America to deal with the revised insurance rates and programs. And just for background, I'm not going to go into all the insurance stuff tonight because I'm not the authorized professional for that. But basically a background on that is that starting with Katrina, we ended up $5 billion in the hole after that disaster in the flood insurance program to rebuild our structures in the Gulf. And subsequently, every disaster since then has tacked numbers onto that So at this point, we're $20 billion in the hole as a nation. You and I, we're taxpayers. Our program's $20 billion in the hole, and we borrow from China every time we have a disaster and have to repair structures with our flood insurance program, because those that live near water, which is all changing, which I'll go into in a minute now, especially the coastal areas, if you had a house that was built before the flood maps, which is our older, more historic housing stock, you did not have to comply with the elevation requirements, only new construction did. So we basically have been subsidizing with low insurance rates and repetitive rebuilding cycles for 20 or 30 years. And we just cannot do that anymore in this country and keep going. So this is unfortunately the demarcation line with the new legislation and insurance, and so now we have to adapt. And the one thing I can tell you is I've been here since Thanksgiving, a week before Thanksgiving. They're still hauling debris off at that point. And you all are very much a fighting population. There's other parts of the country that aren't as interested in fighting. I love the fighting spirit in New Jersey, and so I just want to encourage you to keep doing that and keep being strong, and every day it gets a little better. And so just keep doing that stuff, and it'll all come out. It'll just take you a while to recover. We're still rebuilding after Katrina in the Gulf Coast. So I am Rod Scott. That's my company, LNR Resources. I live in Mandeville, Louisiana, which is on the north shore of Lake Pontchartrain, across from New Orleans. And our community now is 80% elevated in the first 3 blocks of all the structures that used to be repetitively flooded. And we had our 6th hurricane in 9 years last summer. You guys have had 3 major events in 20 months. So stuff's changing, and we're going to talk about that. So this is provided by one of the elevation contractor companies out of Western Florida who's brought machines up in here. His name's Ducky Johnson House Movers. There are other companies out there that do these same kinds of professional elevation services, and I'll talk to you about how to find them towards the later part of the program. He's the one that took the leadership, and I've been talking about doing this for 4 years now, and finally we've got education for the public like you who have to deal with this. Basically, hazard mitigation, the definition is taking action to reduce or eliminate long-term risk from hazards and their effects. So let's give it a little history of where we've come from in the hazard mitigation arena or area in our country. Galveston Island in 1903 had a hurricane that killed 10,000 people. Eliminated all but maybe 20 of their structures. It was larger than New York City as a port city in 1900. They took their remaining 20-30 structures, they elevated them, they seawalled off the front side, the bay or the Gulf side, 5 foot, and pumped sand in and elevated the entire island 5 feet. And you can see these older structures interspersed with the ones that were built after that. Just this much, okay. Anyhow, that was our first large-scale hazard mitigation effort in this country. This was a typical elevation back in the 1900s when they were realizing along the Gulf in a series of hurricanes that happened around 1900 to 1920. You'll notice later in the pictures when I show you these wood blocks underneath, the wood cribbing, we do it much differently now. This is kind of hodgepodgey and it's not the way we like everything to look now. In addition, in the old days, they used individual jacks. They used railroad jacks, and then they used bottle jacks once we got hydraulics and bottle jacks. But remember, every jack had to have an operator. So you'd have a guy out front going 1, 2, 3, and then everybody would try and go like this, and none of it worked. Anyhow, we'll talk about that. We've come a long ways. Okay, let's talk about what's really behind a lot of this issue, and that is the transition that we're going through right now in a global climate. On the East Coast of America, it's documented that since 1900 to 2000, you've had a 14-inch sea level rise, period. This graph right here is the International Climate Change Committee out of the UN that works with multiple nations all over the world. This was their predicted sea level rise cone, if you will, in 2007. This is the new estimate as of 2011, and it goes off the chart at possibly over 1.5 meters rise in sea level. So you have to take that possible 1.5 meters off of wherever you're at right now. So if you're at 5 feet, take a 1.5 meters off of that in 2100. So that's what we're dealing with. And then we're dealing on top of that with more frequent. This is upstate New York after Lee. 24 hours of rain, 13 inches of rain. Inundated 80% of this little historic village called Owego that is locked in time. All of its architecture is right around 1900 or earlier. And 80% of the village went under. School buildings, municipal buildings, just a horrible deal up there. And this is your stuff that you've been doing. Now we add Sandy and a couple of these nor'easters that are really looking kind of different than other nor'easters of the past. More intense, more frequent, more intense with the sea level rise. You're at the interface of the ocean and the continent, and it's a place where you don't want to be on the ground. I've been through Maniloking, I've been through Ortley Beach, I've been now down to the end of this island today, finally, and I've seen a lot of destruction. So we're going to go through the materials that we use in the industry. Here's our wood blocks, our wood cribbing blocks. They're 6 inch by 6 inch, 4 feet long. We call them cribbing or wood blocks. Kids like to call them Jenga blocks when they come over to our job sites. Oh, that's like the Jenga. Those that understand Jenga games. Board games are kind of getting old hat now. I don't think they have an electronic Jenga game. But anyhow, we use a lot of these. And they're either made out of oak for heavy, heavy structures or pine, southern yellow pine for regular structure work. And we use thousands. We have tens of thousands in inventories in all of these companies that do this work. And then we have the steel beams. Structural steel beams are the bread and butter. These two elements are the bread and butter of our industry. We have them in different lengths to go under different sections of houses, depending on the length that we need. They're very heavy flanges, very thick steel beams. They're not the little steel beams that some people might be used to for lighter weight construction. They're really big and heavy. And then doesn't have to be a Deere, it can be any number of other manufacturers, but we use these machines. They're our lifeblood to get the cribbing all the way around to the back of the house. Otherwise, some of our guys are big enough and strong enough to carry 4 of those cribs at one time. We don't have a lot of those guys on our teams, but that machine helps get that cribbing around to the back of the house or structure or building. Remember, we don't have to just elevate homes. We can elevate municipal buildings, church buildings, museum buildings, all sorts of different structures can be elevated. So here's our accessory equipment that we use. We use a 15-ton jack system. All of our jacks are 15 tons or 25 tons or 50 tons of capacity. This is a 3-foot jack, 3-foot long jack. The grooves in the jack actually are where you can, I'll show you in a minute how it mounts into a collar, and you can move the jack up to where the steel is with the jack totally compressed, because you only get half of the lift out of this jack. Any jack safety measure margin is only half of its total stroke with the total bore. So you, or the total stroke length of the ram. So this 3-foot jack can only go 18 inches max at any one time. So after you achieve 18 inches, you have to reset the jack again higher up next to the steel and proceed to do the lifting some more. And we'll see that in a minute. Here's one of our high-strength aluminum bases for those jacks. They use these little dog ears, a lot like on ships, like Coast Guard boats or any big ship when you're rigging for bad weather. So you just adjust the jack with the ram all the way back into its housing up against the steel beam, and then you can get, but this jack takes 3 feet of depth. A lot of times under houses and crawl spaces and whatnot, we don't have that space. So this is the invention that really was phenomenal. It came out of New Zealand first. It's called the New Zealand toe jack. There is another company in this country now that makes them out of Pennsylvania. But it basically has an internal ram and a base plate and then an external square tube that the ram pushes against with another plate on it. So you fit basically if you have a cottage that's on the ground, let's use it at the beach environment, like Ocean Beach, these real tiny little cottages, right on the ground, you basically can shove this jack right underneath that much space, instead of having to dig down 3 feet and get into the water table that I saw here tonight, down towards the end of the island. So the New Zealand toe jacks have been a lifesaver for us with clearance problems. Okay, here we are separating a chimney. We can lift chimneys with houses. Remember, this is the industry that elevated and moved the Cape Hatteras Lighthouse in the early 90s. 5,000-ton structure, 2,900 feet from the ocean, and put it on a new base, and it sits there today. When it was built, it was 3,900 feet from the ocean in the 1880s, so that's how much coastline we've lost on the East Coast. So that basically what you see here is a setup where they have the steel beams going back in under the house, connecting to the steel frame under the house. Everything's put together with a frame. And then a wooden block underneath the stones, because if you were to lift the steel on the stones, it would crack the stones in the mortar, so the wood compresses it. And so basically we're able to elevate that chimney by just putting those 2 New Zealand toe jacks right underneath the steel beam, which comes right out from under the house. And all we did was dig out a couple of rows of stones on the chimney, and boom, up it goes with that. Not boom. That's Bam, that's Emerald. He's a great chef down in New Orleans. Okay, so let's talk about our equipment now. This is the heart and soul of what we have nowadays as a professional industry. We no longer use individual jacks in our industry unless it's a very small operator that does onesie-twosie structures, not large numbers of structures or large weight structures. 1950s, we started putting in the interstate highway system in this country. We moved thousands of homes out of the way of these interstates. And in order to do that quickly, they had to invent a machine that could get a bunch of jacks under a house, boom, lift it up, put it on wheels, and move those houses out of the way of the construction of these great superhighways that went right through the middle of our towns and cities. So modern hydraulics, which just went out of business this year, unfortunately, was the inventor of the unified hydraulic jacking machine. It's another key term you want to check on when you're talking to elevation companies. Do they use a unified hydraulic jacking machine? It unifies all the jacks all at the same time and lifts them all with a lever. And they can be different weights. They can be on a chimney. They can be on a front. Remember, we're lifting slab houses. The entire concrete slab in the Gulf is on pilings, and they're 1.5 feet thick. And so we just lift the whole slab and the house up down there, 12, 14 feet in the ground. That's 800 tons of structure with a 3,000 square foot house. So these wooden houses around here aren't going to be required to be that, they aren't that heavy, so we won't have the same lifting requirements as down in the Gulf. It'll be lighter weight houses here. But this is a modern machine. This costs around $100,000, takes 6 months to build, and there's only 2 builders of this machine in the country, virtually the world right now. So the machines that are on the ground right now are going to do all the lifting in this country until they can get more machines online. And they have to have the business to get the machines ordered and online. So, and this, it's a capital intensive business, and it's not cheap for you all to have done dollar-wise. So just to get all that squared away, you know, that's a $100,000 machine, and you got to wait 6 months to get it. So let's talk about the steps. How do we do this? Okay, it's teams of people that have basically come out of the home relocation industry. They're house movers by trade back in the 50s. Now some of them are into their 4th generation. There's a company out of Maryland that's in a 4th generation setting right now where the son is taking over from its father, who moved the Great Lighthouse in Cape Hatteras. So basically we open up the foundation if it's a closed foundation. A lot of foundations down here are open foundations. And basically we insert the steel beams all the way underneath the house, right up against the floor joists of the house. Here's another setting. This is a house in Rumson. That other house was in Oceanport. A lot of the early elevations, 20 or 30 or I think we're almost at 40 now. A lot of those are happening in the Rumson Oceanport area. It just seems to have really caught their earliest, and they're going up. So this is a very large house. You'll see it later. This is a box beam. So when you put 8 or 10 beams underneath a house, what's to prevent them from doing this? So we have an external box beam that comes between the beams, and they clamp it all together, and it keeps those 8 or 10 beams from going anywhere, and makes it very rigid. So this is the final setup for elevation. You have an external stiffener, the box beam, and the cribbing. You see all the cribbing packs. Notice how neat those cribbing packs are now. We don't do the hodgepodgey thing anymore. Okay, let's talk about other house setups and techniques. This is a sun porch, which they couldn't get underneath the foundation of. It was right near the ground, or it was right over a slab, and they just sistered the floor joists over a slab. So basically they had to take 2x12s and bolt them to all of the vertical studs, which carry the weight of the house, and then we go underneath that with the steel frames going all the way out. I think it went out through the garage over here. And basically then you just lift this whole room off of its foundation with the beam going up against the 2x12. That's also how we do what's called a slab separation. If you have a house that's built on a slab down here, or up here, geographically we're north of the Gulf, up here the slabs are separate from the footings. They aren't a monolithic pour. They aren't strong enough to hold up under elevation. So we have to separate the house from the old slab and then create a new wood floor system similar to all of its wood floor system other sister houses, the older houses basically. But so this is a garage setting. This is the same thing we would do in a house that is all on slab. This is a garage floor, slab garage floor. So basically the beams have come out from that sunroom, which is over here, and gone out through, and we bolt the 2x12s all the way around and stick the beams underneath with a stiffener on top that we clamp down and chain down, which you'll see in just a second. Here the beams are coming out from the house, but they're at ground level. So we can't get a 3-foot jack underneath it. We have to use the toe jack. And believe me, all of the companies that are working in New Jersey right now are on 6 days to 7 days a week. They leave before the sun, the crews do, and I've seen them come home as late as 9 and 10 o'clock at night, all the way through this winter. So this is a hard working industry. They love this stuff. There are very few that do this, and they really love the jobs that they do. But it's a pretty brutal environment up here. A lot of them came out of the Gulf, and they learned real quick about Carhartts and insulated roofs. I did some time in North Iowa, so I already knew about Carhartts, but they didn't last too long before they got full outfits. Here, in the crawl space under a lot of houses, we have what we call a rat slab, which is a very thin pouring of concrete to keep the water moisture from on the ground coming up through your floor system. Instead of busting that up, we just basically put the wood cribs down on the floor, put the toe jack under the steel beam. The wooden cribs take up the difference between the floor joist height in this room and the steel beams going through the rest of the house. And we cue the machine, and up that section of house goes. This is actually a lifting process. It's probably 8 inches now on the 18 that it can go. You can see the gap on the cribbing on the left, and it's pushing directly against that steel, and that's a 15-ton ram. So there's lots of extra. If we have 20 rams in a house that only weighs a couple of 300 tons, we overbuild everything in this industry. This is way more steel and jacks than you need, and we just do that because it's redundant and it gets it up quicker, and we have a very good margin of safety in this industry. An elevation contractor should only elevate 6 inches at a time and put a new block of cribbing in on the cribbing tower, so that if there is a jack failure, remember this is hydraulics, mechanicals, sometimes equipment has issues. You don't want a house dropping 18 inches, you want it to settle an inch where that safety cribbing is at. Very rarely happens. We always have more than enough jacks on the steel to handle 1 or 2 jack failures, but you know, that's Stuff happens, so we overbuild for that. So this is in the garage. We're separating the house from its foundation, and you can see the daylight on the left side as it comes up. Now when this happens, you have to really watch the house, because it happens like this. It's not boom, it's up. It goes very, very slowly. A good qualified crew will take most of the day to go 4 or 5 feet. 8 feet is a 2-day process. Anything over 6 feet, you can imagine they've got to throw those wood blocks taller than them on a stack, so it decreases the amount of height you go every day and increases the labor and costs every time you go over 6 feet. So, so this house is up. That's an Oceanport. That's the garage that we just saw separating from the slab, and so that house is now at final elevation. They clear out underneath, and the new foundation can start. This happened to be in an A zone. They were able to keep their original footing foundation and go up with concrete blocks to the new height. This is in the V zone. This is a house in Rumson on a wetland, backed right up into a wetland. That whole foundation had to go. They had to create a new architecturally designed and stamped V zone foundation. So, this is a house in Rumson that I showed you with the box beams. Basically, they were in the middle of an addition to the house, and the flood came, and so they took the whole thing up, which is required by code. Another one in Rumson. These were probably 4 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago. All of these houses are down on their new foundations now. The process with an experienced company and contractors that are really interfacing should be, for 4 or 5 foot foundation in an A zone where you don't have to replace the footings, put some piers or pilings in, should really only take a maximum of 45 days. In the Gulf, we're turning them around in 45 days for 3 to 4 foot elevations, 60 to 70 days for 14 foot elevations. Okay, I want to go through the tips for selecting the contractor. This is very, very important. Since you do not have a lot of experience in New Jersey with elevating older structures, some have been elevated, but not nearly. In the Gulf, before Katrina, 4 or 5 contractors elevated. Now we have 100 contractors in the Gulf: Texas, Louisiana, Florida. So you had 3 smaller contractors, family contractors in New Jersey before the event. You really, with the damage that we've seen, you really need 60, 70 contractors with more than one machine in this state. We're hoping that we can set up and establish maybe an academy to learn how to operate these machines. Talk to Ocean County VOTEC school about the possibility of starting a technical training school to operate these machines. That's key to getting more crews going, in addition to hiring or paying for more machines. Okay, search your internet, New Jersey home elevation contractor or home elevation contractor. All of the people that want to work professionally in this state that have websites have put in New Jersey home elevations or something on their front page that cues the internet and the searches to pop up their names. And this is really important. So if you can, write these down, or it will be on the website afterwards. This is the basics of hiring one of our professional contractors in our industry to do the work for you. You want contractor license. Unfortunately, in New Jersey, we haven't stiffened the contractor requirements yet. We're hoping to get that done with the DCA. Right now, you just need a home improvement contractor license, $500,000 worth of liability, which doesn't even begin to cover an accident. So in the Gulf, everybody's required to have $3 million of liability insurance. And I believe that's a minimum you should require from any contractor that handles your largest investment in your life, which is a structure or your second home. Proof of liability insurance policy, we just went over, sorry. Proof of cargo insurance. Hardly anybody knows about that. When we have your house up in the air on our steel, we're responsible for the contents of your house. A lot of these multi-story houses have no damage upstairs. Still have the furniture, still have everything upstairs. we have to cover that. Liability insurance does not cover that. That's cargo. So when you're up in the air, you want to have cargo insurance covering your stuff that's up in the upper floors that you didn't have to put in storage. It's still there. So very important. Also, let's talk about this. After you rebuild, and 5 years from now, another grant comes available that you can elevate your home and you're selected, it's all going to be rebuilt. Well, in the Gulf, we have houses with 1-inch marble floors on concrete slabs that are completely rebuilt going up in the air. It's a very gentle process nowadays compared to the old days. Houses were never meant to be elevated or moved, but we do it. So you can rebuild your house and granite countertops and cabinets and still elevate your house. So that's another thing you want to think about, and another reason for cargo insurance that will cover the contents of the structure. Okay, do they use a unified jacking machine? We in the industry feel very strongly about this. There are still some elevation companies that use a little power pack, which does not unify the jacks, and manual jacks. I've even seen them up and down the coast where they're using some manual jacks to adjust a sill plate or something where they're rebuilding a wall. There's no way to control those in a unified manner, and so we really profess that the unified jacking machine is the only thing I would use on a house that I own to elevate. How many years of experience do they have using that unified machine? In the Gulf, a couple of contractors bought machines, had some accidents. It's a very, very highly trained, experienced industry. We're trying to bring on more industry as the demand pays for it, but be very careful. This is again, it's your house. Ask for references, check those references, and ask if the contractor's ever been sued and judged against them. In contracting, I was a contractor for 20 years till I fell off a building in 08, and a miracle I survived, but things happen when you're contracting. If you've got an old house and you open up one wall, usually 2 other things have to get fixed. You know the deal. You all live in old houses down here. A lot of them are old. A good contractor always addresses the issues that come up during a project and resolves those with the person or group they're contracting with. If not, then that goes to adjudication and judgments, and that, in our opinion, means they didn't settle the deal. So that's another big one for us. That's our statement for New Jersey. All the guys I talked to said that was pretty good for a statement, and that's where we're gonna be. We're gonna be up here for many years, and 20 years from now, it'll all be different, and it'll be elevated, and it'll be safe. The foundations we build are 200-year foundations. They're strong, they're sturdy, and they're meant to handle what's being thrown at us. And so, there we go. Snacks will be, no, we don't have any snacks. Sorry, don't let me get started on this. That's basically my presentation tonight. I would like to do some questions. I know it's getting warm in here. I've offered to come back down and do another presentation. It will be up on the internet. I'm here on behalf of the industry, and I don't cost a dime to your community, and so I really want to come back if you need another public session.
I have a question.
So you're done?
No, sir.
Okay.
If that could be turned off, then
Yeah.
we can all see you in here.
We can do that.
Thank you, sir, very
Yeah.
much.
Whoops. Better watch it here. For the borough, it'll be on the borough website.
Yeah.
Beach Haven -NJ.gov.
You have no idea how hot it's getting in here.
Yeah, it's my projector.
It'll probably be up tomorrow. We won't be loading it.
Oh wait,
until
power
tomorrow.
off. Here we go.
The website is beachhaven-NJ.gov.
Thank you.
Do a video of it. Can you take some questions?
Yes, and usually what I'll do is let me start right to left. I'll repeat the question, and then, because we're going to keep rolling tape. So let me start at the front, I'll work to the back, and I'll alternate as I go. and we'll see how that works, okay? Yes?
We've been told by a structural engineer that our house will probably only need to go up about 5 feet. But because I've heard so much about price gouging and whatnot, I would like to know, and I'm sure lots of people would like to know, what are we talking about price-wise for something like this? If you could just give an average so that we would know.
I think that's very important. What kind of pricing can you expect from this industry? Now remember, there are some of these elevation contractors that do only the elevation. The ones coming out of the Gulf are more experienced as general contractors, and they can do either general contracting for the whole job and hire the subs, the electricians, the plumbers, carpenters, or you have a very strong contractor base up here. I think with the numbers of elevations that we've seen, or numbers of damaged structures that have to be elevated, the industry really would prefer to just elevate and go on to the next building and have all your general and subs do all that foundation work. It's a great partnership when we work that way. The pricing usually is based on a 0 to 6 feet, because as I said, anything over 6 feet, we're starting to have to heave those timbers up into the column higher. It takes longer, more manpower. You can be anywhere from 13 or 14 per foot of foundation at the low end. Anything over 6 up to 17. Remember, there are some companies that are here from the Gulf Coast who are renting houses and have expenses beyond out of their home base, so they have to charge more to make their profit margin than someone who's just down the road, okay? A lot of that also has to do with the smaller companies that were here before the disaster are really booked up now. So these other companies coming in are going to relieve that pressure and be able to come to your job quicker. It may cost you $1 or $2 more per foot to get that done on a timely manner than waiting to get on their list. So it's all relative.
It's 13,000, right?
No, $13 a foot, upwards of
Square foot?
$16, $17 a square foot of the footprint of your house.
Footprint.
The footprint
Doesn't
of
matter
your,
how many stories you have.
doesn't matter. We lifted and moved the Great Cape Hatteras Lighthouse 500 feet tall,
Right.
5,000 feet.
Just the
It's the
footprint.
footprint of the main floor of the house. Additions included. So, does that pretty much get you to a point? Okay. It's usually $1 or so, $1.50 a foot after 6. That's kind of how we do that. So let me pop over here.
What can we expect to be the lead time before if we have to do it to get an answer from a company to be able to start to raise the house as to whether or not we should wait to do the construction or do the
Well,
retrofit?
if you're over 50% damaged, which is something that the community decides in the code enforcement area, the rebuilding needs to include the mitigation as part of that rebuilding. Whether it's now or within 4 years, or some communities are doing it differently, but you have to work with your local code officials on rebuilding if you're over 50% damage.
My question is, if I have to raise it, I come to you and say, okay, I want you to raise my house, how long do I have to wait till I expect?
That contractor should be able to tell you exactly when you can be on the
And you don't
schedule.
know what the industry average is right now for those service
The
times?
small guys are well out into 13. The bigger guys that are coming in and are in here are much quicker
I mean,
because they have more machines.
Okay, yeah.
We're talking minimum of 3 to 4 weeks to go up from the time you sign a contract, because you've got to, very often, if you're going from A zone to V zone, you have to have a new foundation designed by an engineer. To get your flood elevation certificate, you got to get a permit, so time goes on when you're doing that. Okay. I saw it.
Just wanted to add one thing. A lot of the houses that I've been doing, showing the laser, they are so far out right now.
Yeah.
When you come up, expect drywall cracking, possibly windows.
Older houses tend to be on foundations that weren't designed like we design foundations now. You're in a beach and sandy environment, so you've had settling over the years. You can have your house elevated to the way it has adjusted, out of square, out of level, but it costs you some more because they have to adjust for that and lift the whole house out of level. And then your new foundation has to be built out of level. So it's really easier to square up your house. The doors are going to work better, the old windows are going to work better, and you'll have some repairs. A lot of them are gutted on the lower levels. You know, so really it's only your upper level that's going to adjust. It usually only adjusts with drywall above the windows or doors where you have the big header boards. Usually in the middle of walls, it won't adjust it won't crack nearly as much with sheetrock. Okay, so let me go here.
Yeah, you do raise it with cribbing and things like that. Now that's wood blocks and it holds the house.
The steel beams do the lifting, and
Right.
the cribbing is underneath it to support it once it's up.
And the cribbing stays as compared to the pilings that.
No, the cribbing does not stay. Cribbing is temporary on steel. Then you have to come in, or somebody has to come in and put a new foundation or add to the foundation that's there. Then we lower the house, take a few up the house, pull some cribbing, lower the house gently onto the new foundation, pull all the cribbing and steel out, and we're gone.
So you raise the foundation on the slab that's there, and then.
We raise the house above the foundation that's there, either add to the house. We don't elevate slabs here because they aren't strong enough. We separate it, then you have to put a new floor in, a new wood floor system, yeah, which is just like the old houses. Yes, sir.
Is there, when you have different contractors and subs, you guys have like a demurrage charge for how long that can be up on the cribs before it's completed?
Right. The question is, do we charge you after a certain time frame up on the cribbing? Yes, most of the industry, especially because we're really under a lot of demand for our services, they want to keep going. So most of them are 45 days before rent is started to be charged.
And that rent is?
Up to the individual contractor, and that can really vary.
Okay.
Yeah. And, okay, well, you moved right into it. It's fine. Then I'll get to it.
I had a soil test done
Okay.
on my property. It cannot take cement. It has to take piling, which really bummed me out because right after the storm hit, I brought in an architect. He came in, I have a typical Shapiro-built Cape Cod, and he said to me, "You have balloon construction. It's going to be impossible to raise, just knock it down," which I'm not going to do.
Amen, sister. She's not going to knock down her old balloon frame house.
I'm not knocking down my family.
Balloon frame houses just take a little more configuring of the steel and the wood cribbing because the floor joists are notched into the beams. They're not nailed in.
But
and
it's not
plate
possible because
construction.
being on piling, it also has to move laterally, not just being jacked up.
No. Pilings, first of all, you need to consult an engineer that has experience with coastal foundations.
All right.
Retro coastal foundations, not just new coastal foundations, because new building and old and retro foundation work is really quite a bit different.
Okay.
Because you have to put the grade beams underneath it if you're in the V zone to match the
I'm
load
not,
of the
I'm not
house.
V, I'm A.
Okay,
So I
well,
don't have
that's
to
a lot
go
better.
very high.
I would
But
get
do
another
need-
opinion based on what I'm hearing
I
right
do
now.
need piling because of the soil that's underneath me. It's too soft.
I would definitely consult with a professional engineer.
Well, the engineer did the soil test.
I would get another opinion.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, because I haven't heard of that in this arena.
I just heard that today too.
Okay, well,
Same
then,
contractor?
we're not going to announce any names here, but you all get together and talk about it, the same person, and find another one. But word of mouth travels in a community, and so what we're finding is the engineers are very quickly ramping up to speed on coastal foundations for older structures, to come back in. Retro foundations is what we call them. So don't be afraid, they should give you a free estimate, other than the soil boring, which you have to pay for. But I run
Well, I
from
have that
people.
done.
I run from people who tell me I got to tear it down because
Why
we
don't
move solid stone houses. We move lots of old log cabins. We move. Our industry moves all sorts of balloon frame houses. And I'll get you now. Go ahead, and then I'll come back.
How about the contents of the house that is going to be raised? Do the contents have to be
Leave them there.
emptied? Really?
Leave them there.
Everything?
Everything. We've moved grand pianos in houses.
Dingbats?
Let me tell you a story. In Galveston, Texas, they just are starting to raise structures. They have 25,000 repetitively flooded structures south of Galveston. They've never dealt with this issue. They just rebuilt, and now insurance is going up, so now they're in a mad dash. So this was a concrete slab house with 2 additions, 2 concrete slab additions with the main slab dowel pinned together. We elevated the whole thing, and we tell people, take your pictures off the wall, put it down on the floor. If you have a fragile glass collection or European glass or something like that, box it up, put it in newspaper, and put it in a box, and leave it right there on the floor. She forgot to box up her crystal or collection of eggs, these glass eggs, and freaked out. You know, we're 5 feet up in the air and on cribbing, and she's like, God, you know, so they get her up into the house. The elevation company puts a ladder up against the foundation, and everybody scrambles in to look at the eggs, and there's a tiny little dust ring around the eggs, and that's it. They hardly didn't even move. So really understand that it's not a perfect process, but this unified jacking process takes that house up like this. It's just gentle compared to how we used to do it. And you've already been through enough with the flooding. You don't want to go in and beat your house up some more. Yes?
How much clearance do you need? Because your pricing is based on 6 feet, so how high can you go 5? If you need to go 5 feet, are you still within that 6 feet?
What our companies do, our professional elevation companies, there's either a benchmark, is what a professional surveyor, you have to have your property surveyed for flood elevation. The community requires that for permitting. They will put a benchmark peg into a tree or a pole, and then we shoot that with a laser, and we take you up above that so that they can build the foundation to that benchmark.
Yeah, how much of a clearance do you need to build the foundation? How much
we take you 6 inches to 8 inches above where the house has to ultimately be. Yeah, we give the workman room.
Okay.
Yeah, and if it's only 3 foot elevation, we usually take it to 5 so the guys can move around under there, or 6 feet, especially if you have to demo that original foundation with a bobcat or something.
Okay.
We'll, you know, up to 6 feet, it's all one price usually.
Yeah, so I was
okay. Yeah, okay, let's go to here, and I'm working my way back. Be patient, yeah.
If your first floor is gutted, as you said many houses are, and the second floor is still intact, and it just seems like it's going to be a long process before you can get it raised, is it better to repair the first floor and you put walls back up and all?
Again, it's up to you and the code enforcement people in the community, because if you're over 50% damaged, by code, you're supposed to mitigate your property as part of the rebuilding process.
Does that mean before?
Yeah, but doesn't
different communities are handling this differently. You have to go with whatever Beach Haven has determined and the elected officials determine.
Well, if they determine that it has to be raised, is it still better to repair the thing before you
We can elevate
raise
your
it?
structure, repaired or not repaired. Either way. So, anything more back in here? Okay, I'm going to hit this one. I'm coming back to you.
Once the house is raised, and let's assume we have to put pilings in, does
Right.
the house have to be moved to put the pilings in?
Okay, this is a question about pilings. Again, it goes back to your professional engineer design. There is no room to move houses into the street. Communities won't allow that. They probably won't, DEP probably won't let you go out onto the beach. Besides, they're trying to put sand back on the beaches, which is really important. It's a real quandary. I mean, the wooden pilings are less per piling than the screw pilings, the metal helical pilings. Both are qualified by FEMA to be used in beach construction or coastal construction. You got to work that out between your engineer and the community, the building code folks at the permit office. It's a team effort. You got to come in, consult with, but you know, you can't move the houses in these beach environments very far at all because you got 50 feet to the road in front of you and back, some of them right up against the dunes or your neighbor, unless you've had a demolition behind you where you can relocate. And it costs about 30% more to put it on wheels and roll it back and then bring it back and elevate it up onto the new foundation, 35% more. So really, a lot of the solutions are going to be found in vertical elevation and dealing with existing pilings or the screw helical pilings that you go in. That's how we see it. But again, that's not our, we just elevate them and put them back down. Okay, and my guy back here is waiting for someone in the white shirt, yeah.
Well, that was my question. You're going from A to a B, and there's no place to go. So how do you get pilings in our house if there's no place to go?
If you want wood pilings, you gotta get up 30, 40 feet in the air to be able to put that piling rig underneath it.
Yeah, so can you roll it over, put the pilings in?
You have to get permission from the community to be able, or your neighbor, to use their yard. We're up against some technological issues. In the Gulf, we've got lots of room between structures out in the bayou areas. And there, we really just use existing foundation piles, we drive them deeper, add to them, and then come up. With these wooden structures, we can't use the wooden structure to drive the pilings any deeper. So it really becomes a matter of reuse of the wooden piles, depending on your engineer and their design, or the installation of these metallic sectional helicoils, which there's 4 different manufacturers. Okay.
And if you have to jack it up 40 feet to get the pilings in there, how much?
We don't go to 40 feet. How much would it cost?
Yeah.
$1 a foot over 6 feet times how many feet? Yeah, yeah. So.
You got a very patient man over there.
Yes, sir.
Just wanted to know how many qualified companies are in your area that can come up here and help out. The demand up here for exceeds the qualified people. I heard like we're getting like 75 phone calls a day.
Some of them are chasing 700 leads.
How many guys do you have in your area that can come up here and help?
Well, I can tell you for a fact, the big, huge grant program that blossomed from 4 to 100 contractors in the Gulf is just about over. A lot of those companies are going to be looking for work. There's a few of them that are already up in here. Ducky Johnson's one. He's helping Wolf out of Pennsylvania. Experts out of Maryland. Multiple machines. Times almost a dozen machines per company when you talk those companies. So you're going to see more companies coming in. We just hope that the state will provide a more stringent contractor qualification so we don't have accidents. Because accidents will put us behind on this process because people won't have that confidence that we think our industry now has, 6,000 structures in the Gulf, including concrete slabs. It's a pretty good record. And we only had a few mistakes because the contractor requirements weren't tough enough. Now they're very tough in the Gulf. We've encouraged the state of New Jersey and New York to adopt those same contractor qualifications for elevating. Yes?
I'm not sure if this is a question for you or for the town officials. The grant that we applied for or the homeowners applied for, when are we going to get some answers from the town on that?
We know about those grants.
They
take time to come.
We were told 6 to 9 months before we know if Beach Haven was given any grant funding based on the other municipalities within the state that are also applying for the HMGP funds.
Okay. So whoever applied is going to be notified, or we have to actually...
Absolutely. There's a whole application process that will come next. All we've done so far is put an interest in and a letter of intent with property owners who are interested. There's an application process to follow that we're in the infancy of the grant program right now.
How many of you have seen the cost comparisons that FEMA has put out now with the new insurance rates at flood elevation, at below flood elevation, at flood elevation, or 1 to 2 feet over flood elevation, which is most communities are adopting at least 1 foot
2 feet
over. Is that if you're below flood elevation, the new changes in the insurance, basically if you sell your home or lose your policy and have to restart the policy, or you get a new owner in that home that has to start a new policy, if it's below flood elevation, they're looking at 15 to 20 grand a year. So you multiply that times 4 or 5 years, you've paid for the project. And you've got marketability for your structure. So it's tough to swallow, but you're going to all make the right decisions ultimately. And this is a process. It's going to take several years to get your community, like our community has been since Katrina, 9 years now, and we're 80% elevated. So it takes a while. Be patient. Rebuild if you can. If you're under 50%, work with the community, work as a team, as a community, and you'll come out okay on the other end. It just is tough now. Yes?
When are we gonna know the exact height we have to be at?
Can't tell you.
You don't know yet?
Can't tell you.
So we're gonna.
We're elevating
until the fall,
structures as
right?
an industry. Well, communities have adopted these ABFEs, so they can't sell flood insurance right now. So they've adopted them, but they could adjust.
FEMA could adjust it. So if we're gonna raise
ABFEs tend to
4
be
feet
higher
now,
than
we
the
could have
final.
an extra foot.
No, very seldom do they go higher than ABFEs. In Katrina, our ABFEs from the final maps came out were a foot or two lower. So now they only have to elevate a foot or two lower than we did right after the storm. But some people didn't want to
What
wait.
Chip Bottom gave me as a minimum, I can pretty well go by, 2 foot above.
If it's the ABFE and it's been adopted, that's a
Probably worst
legal,
case.
that's a legal map height.
So I'll go 2
Is
foot
there a
above.
foot of freeboard you have to consider?
Well, there are communities that are, Manaloking's putting a limit on how far above the ABFE you can
Because of
go.
the height.
Because of the height restrictions, yeah. So again, it's work with your local government, make it a team project, try not to aggravate them and try not to let them step on you. So it's a give and take work thing together to get that property up, ratables up, everything
So
going.
in the fall, if I raise 4 feet, I'm basically safe. They tell me I have to go 2 feet.
Right.
4 feet from what?
I can't tell you that. If the community agrees with that, then,
Safe, okay.
The problem with those FEMA cartoons, and that's what they really are, is it doesn't reference the datum line. It just gives you above grade. And, you know.
well, it says
the elevator-
BFE, it says BFE on those graphics.
Yeah, but they don't give you a datum that's below grade. They're acting as though the grade is the datum line, and we're supposed to be at the 1988 datum, is that correct?
Your maps here were like our pre-Katrina maps, they're dinosaur maps, your original 80s maps.
Yeah, but I mean, you need somewhere to start for everybody.
But your new surveyors, your land surveyor will have all that data information. In the elevation certificate that they produce for you, it has NAVGD datum used, and they'll
Right,
give
but
you
those-
the correct.
as I
Elevation certificate, primary document for you to get involved with this
Absolutely.
process.
But we have a daughter that has the problem. How does she even know what to do? Nobody gives you an answer. She's ready to go and wants to go up, but you can't, nobody can say how many blocks you have to go up or whatever. And
Well,
that's
the elevation certificate will tell you how high it has to go
And-
according to the ABFEs that have been adopted by the state and your local.
But they haven't been adopted by the state.
The
I don't
governor
think-
adopted the
They
ABFE.
They have adopted them? I thought it was supposed to be May
Signed that
or
in a long
August.
time ago.
That's final, that's
She was told all
the
this.
clarification. But formally, the state has adopted the ABFE.
Governor Christie adopted the
Long time.
advisory maps. Plus, he added an extra foot. You'll
Okay.
see the word freeboard, which means, one freeboard is 1 foot additional. You have to go to the building department and just look. What we're doing is, the worst case scenario probably right now, as Rod mentioned, is the advisory maps. We'll have a set of working maps in Ocean County probably in the next 60 days. That's when we can go back and really dispute, and it's really the zones. I don't know if the heights will really change too much. If anything, if we come down a foot, they might add another freeboard on there, because at that point you can't be too high. So I think what most people are doing, going back to this gentleman here, I think most people are repairing their houses to make them livable right now. And because the home raising situation is a major task. At Beach Haven, we have 2,250 residents. 500 probably have to be raised. It takes you 45 to 90 days to raise one house.
Well, to finish the project, to
Yeah,
raise a house,
yeah, but I mean,
2.5 to 3 days.
But to do the whole thing. Now,
Right.
we're not going to do that kind of construction between Memorial Day and Labor Day, because
That's another thing we heard about down here. Everything stops between.
yeah, I mean, you
rented.
have 100 days really for the businesses and everything. I mean, you can't have heavy equipment and kids and everything. It just doesn't work, okay? So when you really look at this becomes a longer term project.
We'll be on the lagoon side probably during the summer. Back over on the island is a week after Labor Day.
Yeah, so.
The key is to get a contract with an elevation company,
Get
put
in
a
the queue.
deposit down, get in the queue. You can always refund that or cancel the contract. Up until the day you go.
One more question.
Yeah, what-
If you raise your house now, does that have anything to do with the grant later?
There is no
Yes.
reimbursement.
Yes?
Here's the
Talking
thing.
about the house mitigation.
Okay,
grant?
I mean,
Mayor, you probably want to.
there's 2 areas in which you qualify for money. If you do have flood insurance,